A single candle burned steadily against the darkness, its flame reflected in the polished surface of a carved table where rivers, roads, and castles had been etched into seasoned oak. Beyond the narrow windows, King's Landing slept beneath drifting sea mist, the bells of the great sept long since fallen silent, while the Blackwater rush carried the faint scent of salt into the red keep. Somewhere below, a sentry shifted his spear against cold stone. Somewhere farther away, a dog barked, and then thought better of disturbing the night. The city seemed peaceful enough that no one looking up from Flea Bottom would suspect how many lives could change before sunrise. It is inside this quiet hour that our story begins, as we gently explore why Cersei was the smartest player in the Game of Thrones, taking our time with the lore until sleep comes naturally. If you've joined these journeys before, quietly remember which night you've reached. If this is your first, let this be night 1. The strange thing about Cersei Lannister is not that so many people hated her. Westeros has always produced cruel rulers, proud lords, ambitious queens, and dangerous schemers. The mystery is something subtler. How did one of the most intelligent political players in the Seven Kingdoms become remembered, especially by many viewers of the television adaptation, primarily for her failures? The novels leave a far more complicated portrait, one that rewards slow attention rather than quick judgment. As the candle burns beside that silent map, you are invited to sit beside it as well, looking not only at victories and defeats, but at the choices that connected them long before swords were ever drawn. Why does everything seem to begin with a prophecy that could have been ignored? The answer lies not in King's Landing, but far to the west, beneath the golden hills of the Westerlands, where House Lannister ruled from Casterly Rock. Cersei Lannister entered the world in 266 ARAC, alongside her twin brother Jaime, children of Lord Tywin Lannister and Lady Joanna Lannister. Their family already stood among the richest and most powerful in Westeros, their wealth flowing from the gold mines beneath the rock and from generations of careful rule. Tywin had restored the prestige of House Lannister after the weakness of his father, Lord Tytos, bringing rebellious bannermen such as Houses Rhaen and Tarbeck to ruin during the brutal campaigns remembered as the Rhaen-Tarbeck Revolt. Cersei therefore inherited something more valuable than gold. She inherited certainty, the quiet belief that Lannisters were born to command while others obeyed. The halls of Casterly Rock shaped that certainty from childhood. Unlike Winterfell, where children wandered broad courtyards beneath open skies, the rock descended deep into the earth, its chambers carved into an ancient mountain overlooking the sunset sea. Torches flickered along endless galleries, where banners bearing the golden lion stirred in hidden draughts. The sound of waves crashing against cliffs echoed through caverns that had housed kings long before Aegon the Conqueror crossed the narrow sea. Young Cersei grew up surrounded by symbols of permanence. Stone did not bend, gold did not apologize. Power belonged to those strong enough to keep it. Her closest companion was Jaime, her twin, whose resemblance to her became famous throughout the Seven Kingdoms. They shared the same green eyes and bright golden hair, features that later caused one of the greatest political crises in the history of the Iron Throne. As children, however, they simply shared an understanding that no one else seemed able to match. Circe later remembers believing that Jaime was another part of herself, as though they had once been a single person divided into two bodies. That feeling shaped many of the decisions both would make as adults. It also explains why separation always felt unnatural to her, even when duty demanded it. Another child lived beside them, though Circe rarely regarded him with affection. Tyrion Lannister was born in 273 AC, and his arrival forever altered the household. Lady Joanna died giving birth to him, a loss that deeply wounded Tywin Lannister, who had genuinely loved his wife despite his stern reputation. Tyrion survived, but his dwarfism and Joanna's death became burdens he carried from infancy. Circe herself grew to despise him, blaming him not only for their mother's death, but for bringing shame upon their proud house. The novels never portray this hatred as rational. Instead, they reveal how grief, pride, and family expectation hardened into something much colder over the years. Tywin's influence reached every corner of his children's lives, although he seldom needed to raise his voice. His expectations spoke loudly enough. Jaime would become one of the finest knights in Westeros. Circe would marry advantageously and strengthen House Lannister through alliance. Tyrion, despite his sharp mind, would forever struggle to earn his father's approval. Tywin admired competence above almost every other quality. Weakness disgusted him, hesitation frustrated him, and public humiliation was something he neither forgave nor forgot. Circe absorbed these lessons completely, though she reached a different conclusion than her father. She came to believe that fear often accomplished what respect could not. Why then did a girl raised amid unmatched wealth become obsessed with the future instead of enjoying the present? The answer arrives in one of the most unsettling childhood episodes preserved in the novels. Curious, proud, and eager to prove herself fearless, young Circe traveled with her companion, Malara Heatherspoon, to visit an elderly fortune-teller known as Maggie the Frog near Lannisport. Maggie was not a noble woman, nor a maester, nor a septa. She was said to possess strange knowledge brought from the distant lands east of the Narrow Sea. Whether that knowledge came from genuine magic or from remarkable insight remains one of those quiet mysteries Martin leaves deliberately unresolved. Inside Maggie's humble dwelling, the air smelled of herbs, old smoke, and things left too long inside sealed jars. The woman offered no comforting words. Instead, she cut Circe's thumb and tasted her blood before answering questions that no child should ever have asked. Circe wanted to know if she would marry Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. The answer was no. She would instead marry a king. She wanted to know if she would become queen. Yes, but another queen, younger and more beautiful, would come to cast her down and take everything she held dear. Finally came the darkest words of all. Gold would be their crowns, and gold their shrouds, speaking of her children long before they were born. The prophecy did not end there. In Circe's memories from a feast for crows, Maggie also foretold that when her tears had drowned her, the Valonqar, a High Valyrian word meaning little brother, would wrap his hands around her pale white throat and choke the life from her. That final line becomes an obsession throughout Circe's later life. She immediately assumes it must refer to Tyrion, who was indeed her younger brother. Yet readers have long noticed another possibility. Jaime, though born only moments after Cersei, is technically the younger twin according to the order of birth. The novels never resolve the question. Like many prophecies in A Song of Ice and Fire, its greatest power comes not from certainty, but from the decisions people make because they believe it. That single visit changed Cersei in ways no sword or battle ever could. Before meeting Maggie, she was ambitious. Afterward, ambition mixed with vigilance. Every beautiful young noble woman could become the promised queen. Every unexpected setback seemed to confirm the destiny was already tightening its grip. Rather than dismissing the prophecy, Cersei measured the world against it year after year. Ironically, this constant effort to prevent its fulfillment often pushed her toward choices that made it feel increasingly real. George R.R. Martin repeatedly explores this pattern throughout his histories, where the fear of fate becomes one of fate's strongest servants. As the candle continues to burn beside the map of King's Landing, the city remains quiet, unaware that the path toward its future queen began not in the Red Keep, but in a small house outside Lannisport, where an old woman spoke a handful of sentences to an impatient child. Those words echoed through marriages, councils, betrayals, and wars that would not unfold for decades before Cersei ever sat beside King Robert Baratheon, before Eddard Stark rode south from Winterfell, before dragons returned to the world across the narrow sea. Another battle had already begun inside her own mind. It was silent, invisible, and relentless. And for all the armies that would one day clash across Westeros, that hidden battle may have been the one that shaped the kingdom most of all. Why did Tywin Lannister refuse to see his daughter as his true political heir when she so clearly inherited his instincts? That question lingers over every stage of Cersei's early life because the evidence points in two different directions at once. Tywin repeatedly entrusted her with delicate responsibilities inside House Lannister, expected her to understand diplomacy, and educated her as the daughter of one of the greatest lords in Westeros. Yet when succession, command, and lasting authority were discussed, his eyes always turned toward Jaime, and later, however reluctantly, toward Tyrion. The contradiction never escaped Cersei herself. She became convinced that had she been born male, no one in the Seven Kingdoms would have questioned her ability to rule. By the standards of noble daughters, Cersei received an exceptional education. At Casterly Rock, she learned heraldry, the histories of the great houses, household administration, accounts, courtly etiquette, and the careful language of negotiation. A lady ruling in her husband's absence was expected to oversee servants, collect revenues, manage supplies, and judge disputes among retainers. Cersei mastered these lessons quickly, but she watched another education unfold beside her. Jaime trained daily with sword and lance beneath experienced masters-at-arms, learning the language of warfare that remained closed to most women. The difference angered her long before she possessed the words to explain why. In one of Cersei's memories, she recalls secretly exchanging clothing with Jaime while they were children, delighting in how easily even adults could mistake one twin for the other. The game was harmless enough, yet it revealed something deeper. She did not simply wish to imitate her brother. She wanted access to the world reserved for him. The incident survives in her memory because it exposed a truth she never forgot. Many people judged authority by clothing before they judged it by intelligence. Westeros was built upon inherited customs, and customs often proved stronger than talent. Tywin himself embodied those customs despite his remarkable pragmatism in other matters. He believed firmly in order, hierarchy, and duty. His heir would command armies. His daughter would strengthen alliances through marriage. He never doubted Cersei's intelligence, but intelligence alone did not overturn centuries of inheritance law. To Tywin, personal wishes mattered less than the needs of House Lannister. Ironically, that same philosophy taught Cersei to suppress compassion whenever it conflicted with power, even while she quietly rejected the limits he placed upon her. Why then did her greatest childhood ambition focus not on ruling Casterly Rock, but on marrying Prince Rhaegar Targaryen? During the reign of King Aerys II Targaryen, such a match seemed entirely possible. House Lannister stood at the height of its influence. Tywin served as Hand of the King for nearly 20 years, guiding much of the realm's government while Aerys grew increasingly erratic. Cersei admired Prince Rhaegar from afar, as did countless noble women across Westeros. Handsome, scholarly, accomplished with harp and sword alike, Rhaegar seemed destined to become one of the greatest kings since Jaehaerys I. The marriage never came close to reality. According to the world of ice and fire, Aerys increasingly grew suspicious of Tywin's influence and rejected proposals that might strengthen House Lannister even further. Some accounts suggest he openly insulted Joanna Lannister years earlier at court, damaging relations between the two families long before Robert's rebellion. As the king's paranoia deepened, he began seeing rivals where once he had seen loyal servants. A marriage between Rhaegar and Cersei would have tied the Iron Throne even more closely to Tywin. That was precisely what Aerys wished to avoid. Maggie's prophecy returned here with quiet precision. When Cersei had asked whether she would marry Rhaegar, the answer had been immediate. Never. You will wed the king. At the time, those words seemed disappointing. Years later, they appeared almost miraculous. Rhaegar never became king. He fell at the Battle of the Trident in 283 AC beneath the great warhammer of Robert Baratheon. Robert claimed the Iron Throne through conquest, his Targaryen blood giving legal support to victory won on the battlefield. Without intending it, Maggie's prophecy had distinguished between prince and king with unsettling accuracy. Robert's rebellion transformed the political map of Westeros. House Stark joined with House Arryn, House Baratheon, and House Tully against the Iron Throne. Jon Arryn raised his banners after Aerys demanded the heads of Robert Baratheon and Eddard Stark. The decisive Battle of the Trident broke Targaryen power in the field. Shortly afterward, Lord Tywin marched the Lannister host to King's Landing, presenting himself as an ally to Aerys before ordering the sack of the city. Sir Gregor Clegane killed Princess Elia Martell and her children, Princess Rhaenys and Prince Aegon, while Ser Amory Lorch also played his part in the brutal killings described in the histories. Jaime Lannister slew King Aerys inside the Red Keep to prevent the Mad King's plan to burn the city with hidden caches of wildfire. Those final days of the dynasty would shape Cersei's thinking for the rest of her life. She saw that crowns did not pass only through birthright. They passed through calculation, speed, and the willingness to act while others hesitated. Robert Baratheon became king because he won and because the surviving great houses accepted that victory. Tywin secured House Lannister's position not by remaining loyal to a dying regime, but by arriving at exactly the moment when his support became indispensable. Cersei absorbed the lesson completely. Legitimacy mattered. Force mattered. Yet timing often mattered most of all. When Robert accepted Cersei as his bride after the war, many throughout the realm celebrated what appeared to be a perfect political settlement. The new king gained the support and immense wealth of House Lannister. Tywin placed his daughter beside the Iron Throne at last. The wounds of civil war seemed ready to heal through marriage rather than bloodshed. Songs would later remember the wedding as a joyful beginning for a restored kingdom. The songs, however, knew almost nothing of the people standing beneath their own verses. Robert did not marry because he loved Cersei. Every major source, from the novels to Martin's companion histories, makes clear that Lyanna Stark remained the great love of his imagination even after her death at the Tower of Joy. Cersei herself recalls that on their wedding night Robert whispered another woman's name. Whether drink loosened his tongue or grief simply overpowered caution hardly mattered. One word shattered any hope that affection might eventually grow between husband and wife. The marriage that united two of the greatest houses in Westeros began with absence rather than intimacy. For Cersei, the disappointment was immediate, but the adjustment was astonishingly swift. She did not spend years mourning what might have been. Instead, she began studying the court that now surrounded her. The Red Keep was unlike Casterly Rock. Here, every corridor held rival ambitions. The small council balanced competing interests, from houses Arryn, Lannister, Baratheon, and later others besides. Varys gathered whispers from every corner of the realm. Grand Maester Pycelle served with outward humility, while quietly favoring Lannister interests. Peter Baelish turned coin into influence with a smile that concealed almost everything. Before long, Cersei realized that the true contest for power was not fought in tourneys or battles. It unfolded behind closed doors, where a single conversation could redirect the future of kingdoms. As dawn slowly approaches beyond the windows of the Red Keep, the young queen has already begun learning its rhythms. She has fulfilled Maggie's first prediction by marrying a king. Yet almost nothing else resembles the life she imagined as a girl beneath the golden halls of Casterly Rock. The Iron Throne is closer than ever before, but so are disappointment, humiliation, and opportunity. Around her stand men who believe they understand the game better than she does. In the years ahead, Cersei intends to prove that every one of them has underestimated her. Why did Cersei remain faithful to Jaime while refusing to be faithful to Robert, even though that choice endangered everything she hoped to protect? The answer is more complicated than romance, and far more dangerous than simple rebellion. For Cersei, Robert Baratheon occupied a throne, but Jaime occupied a place in her identity itself. She had never believed their bond was shameful. Instead, she believed the world was wrong for condemning something that had existed since the day they were born together at Casterly Rock. That conviction became the hidden foundation beneath nearly every political crisis that followed. Robert entered his reign as a celebrated warrior rather than an experienced administrator. He had won the Iron Throne by defeating Prince Rhaegar Targaryen at the Battle of the Trident and breaking the remaining resistance during Robert's rebellion, but ruling demanded a different kind of endurance. The king preferred hunting in the Kingswood, grand feasts in the Red Keep, melees, tournaments, and long nights with wine and willing companions. Matters of taxation, harbor fees, grain shipments, appointments, and diplomacy increasingly fell to his small council. Jon Arryn served faithfully as Hand of the King, smoothing over disagreements before they reached Robert's ears and quietly holding together a government whose monarch often wished to escape it. For many years, that arrangement appeared remarkably stable. Lord Stannis Baratheon governed Dragonstone with relentless discipline. Renly Baratheon became Lord of Storm's End and later joined the small council as Master of Laws. Varys maintained his immense network of informants across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond the Narrow Sea. Grand Maester Pycelle continued advising the throne much as he had under previous kings. Petyr Baelish steadily expanded the crown's revenues through clever accounting, loans, customs duties, and methods that impressed Robert while alarming more cautious observers such as Tyrion years later. On the surface, the kingdom seemed prosperous enough that few questioned how fragile its foundations had quietly become. Cersei watched all of this with unusual patience. She understood something Robert never fully appreciated. A realm is not governed only from the Iron Throne. It is governed through access. Who speaks to the king before breakfast matters? Who controls appointments inside the Red Keep matters? Which household knights guard which gates matters? Which servants carry letters through hidden passages matters? Many rulers imagine that authority flows downward from the crown. Cersei increasingly recognized that influence often flowed upward from those who controlled the people closest to it. Why then did Robert fail to notice the court slowly changing around him? One reason lies in his own temperament. The novels consistently portray him as a man who preferred immediate pleasures over careful observation. He remained capable of remarkable insight in rare moments, particularly when discussing war or judging character. Yet those moments grew less frequent as the years passed. His grief over Lyanna Stark never truly faded. Instead of confronting that grief, he buried it beneath drinking, hunting, and the endless distractions available to a victorious king. While Robert looked backward toward the life he believed had been stolen from him, Cersei spent every day looking ahead. Her private relationship with Jaime continued throughout these years, hidden behind carefully managed appearances. Jaime's appointment to the King's Guard had originally come from King Aerys II shortly before Robert's rebellion, a decision many believed was intended to wound Tywin by denying him his chosen heir. After the rebellion, Jaime remained a sworn brother despite carrying the dishonorable title of Kingslayer. White armor, white cloak, and lifelong vows separated him from ordinary family life. Yet those vows could not separate him from Cersei. The secret survived because few people wished to believe such a scandal possible, and because both twins had spent a lifetime learning how to conceal their deepest truths. The greatest consequence of that secret arrived with the births of 3 royal children. Prince Joffrey came first, followed by Princess Myrcella, and finally Prince Tommen. Throughout the Seven Kingdoms, they were recognized as the legitimate heirs of King Robert Baratheon and Queen Cersei Lannister. Their golden hair, however, quietly contradicted generations of Baratheon appearance. Since the days of Orys Baratheon, the blood of House Baratheon consistently produced black hair and blue eyes, even when mixed with many other noble lines. This pattern had become so reliable that it appeared repeatedly in great genealogies preserved by Meisters. That detail seems almost insignificant until one remembers Jon Arryn's final investigation. Before his death in 298 AC, the Hand of the King spent considerable time examining the lineages of great houses alongside Stannis Baratheon. Their quiet research eventually led to a simple observation. Every acknowledged child born from Baratheon marriages inherited the family's dark features. Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen did not. The famous phrase remembered by Eddard Stark, "The seed is strong," was less a mystical revelation than the conclusion of careful genealogical study. Yet Cersei herself had already accepted the enormous risk years before anyone uncovered it. Why? The answer reveals one of the most revealing differences between her and many other players in the game. She did not merely seek survival, she sought certainty. If Robert fathered her heirs, House Baratheon would ultimately dominate the succession. If Jaime fathered them instead, then every future king or queen descending from her children would still carry the blood of House Lannister. From Cersei's perspective, this was not simply adultery. It was the preservation of her own house, at the center of royal power for generations. The irony is striking because Robert himself rarely questioned his children's parentage. He loved hunting far more than fatherhood, and the distance between king and family widened steadily as the years passed. Joffrey grew proud, cruel, and eager to imitate authority without understanding responsibility. Tommen remained gentle and trusting. Myrcella displayed intelligence and courtesy that many characters quietly admired. Robert occasionally expressed frustration with Joffrey's behavior, yet he never seriously considered that the boy might not be his own. The possibility lay beyond what he believed the world capable of producing. Why does this matter so much when judging Cersei's intelligence? Because it demonstrates the scale on which she was already thinking, long before the main events of a Game of Thrones begin. She was not reacting to crises as they emerged. She had spent nearly 2 decades constructing an alternative royal bloodline, hidden in plain sight. Every smile exchanged at court, every public appearance beside Robert, every celebration of another royal birth reinforced the illusion. Even Varys, whose little birds heard countless secrets whispered through King's Landing, treated the matter with extraordinary caution. The deception succeeded not because it was impossible to uncover, but because it required someone to question assumptions that nearly everyone accepted. As evening settles once more over the towers of the Red Keep, children laugh somewhere beyond a courtyard, where crimson banners stir in the sea wind. The queen watches them from a window high above the city, seeing not only sons and a daughter, but the future of dynasties. Far below, the people of King's Landing cheer the royal family whenever they appear together. None of them realize that the greatest secret in Westeros is not hidden beneath Dragonstone, beyond the wall, or across the narrow sea. It is growing openly inside the royal nursery, wrapped in golden blankets beneath the lion and the crowned stag. Why did the strongest kingdom in Westeros begin to unravel while its king still sat securely upon the Iron Throne? The answer cannot be found on a battlefield, because there was no invading army gathering outside King's Landing. Instead, the first cracks appeared quietly inside the council chambers of the Red Keep, where debts accumulated, old loyalties weakened, and one indispensable man slowly approached the end of his life. For nearly 15 years after Robert's rebellion, Lord Jon Arryn held the realm together through judgment, patience, and compromise. Many characters later remembered Robert's reign as peaceful, but much of that peace rested upon the shoulders of a single aging hand. Jon Arryn had raised both Robert Baratheon and Eddard Stark in the Eyrie during their youth, making him more than a political advisor. He was a father in all but blood. During the rebellion, he had risked everything by refusing King Aerys the Second's command to execute his own wards, choosing honor over obedience, and thereby beginning the war itself. After Robert's victory, he remained Hand of the King, calming disputes among the great houses while allowing Robert to pursue the life he preferred. His influence extended into nearly every decision of state. Without Jon Arryn, Robert possessed authority. With him, Robert possessed stability. By the final years of the 290s AC, however, Jon Arryn had begun asking dangerous questions. Together with Stannis Baratheon, he investigated the ancestry of the royal children through old genealogies and the records maintained by Grand Maester Malian, whose massive work, the lineages and histories of the great houses of the Seven Kingdoms, contained generations of marriages and births. Their research focused on something seemingly trivial: hair color. Yet throughout those ancient pages, the same pattern appeared again and again. Baratheon black overcame blonde Lannister gold every single time. The implication was devastating. Why did Jon Arryn choose Stannis as his closest partner in this investigation, rather than Robert himself? The novels never provide a direct answer, but the decision fits both men's characters remarkably well. Stannis valued law above affection and possessed an almost painful devotion to truth, regardless of where it led. Robert, by contrast, had little patience for painstaking inquiry, and even less desire to examine his own family. Jon Arryn may also have wished to gather undeniable proof before burdening an aging king already distracted by governance he scarcely enjoyed. Whatever his reasoning, secrecy became essential, and secrecy gave others time to act first. The old hand died suddenly in 298 AC after a brief illness. Officially, the court believed he had succumbed to a fever that worsened rapidly despite every effort made by Grand Maester Pycelle. His final words, remembered by his wife Lisa Arryn, were, "The seed is strong." At first, the phrase sounded almost meaningless, another fragment spoken by a dying man drifting between clarity and confusion. Only much later would Eddard Stark understand that Jon Arryn had left behind not a farewell, but the final piece of an unfinished investigation. The true circumstances of Jon Arryn's death stand among the most important revelations in the early novels. Readers eventually learn through Peter Baelish that Lysa Arryn poisoned her own husband using the tears of Lys, a nearly tasteless poison famous for imitating natural illness. She committed the murder after Baelish persuaded her to do so through years of manipulation, promises, and emotional control. Lysa then sent a secret letter to Winterfell falsely accusing House Lannister of the crime. That single deception altered the history of Westeros. It brought Eddard Stark south, deepened suspicion between great houses, and ensured that the real architects of the conspiracy remained hidden. Cersei herself did not arrange Jon Arryn's murder in the books, an important distinction from assumptions sometimes made by characters within the story. She certainly benefited from his death because his investigation ended before reaching Robert directly, but benefiting from an event is not the same as causing it. Martin repeatedly builds his political conflicts around overlapping conspiracies rather than single masterminds. Peter Baelish sought chaos because chaos created opportunity. Lysa sought Baelish's approval. Cersei sought to protect her children. Each acted independently, yet their decisions reinforced one another until catastrophe became unavoidable. Why then did Robert summon Eddard Stark instead of another experienced Southern lord after Jon Arryn's death? Friendship outweighed convenience. Robert trusted few men completely, and Ned Stark had fought beside him from the opening days of the rebellion through the final campaigns that destroyed House Targaryen. The king believed Ned's honor was beyond question. In Robert's mind, the North remained untouched by the corruption he increasingly associated with court life. He wanted an old friend nearby, never imagining that bringing Ned to King's Landing would place two uncompromising worldviews on a direct collision course. Far away in Winterfell, Eddard had spent nearly 15 years governing the North with remarkable consistency. House Stark ruled from the ancient castle built beside its steaming hot springs, where the great keep, the first keep, the God's Wood with its heart tree and the vast curtain walls, reminded every visitor that Winterfell measured its history in thousands of years rather than centuries. Ned's concerns centered upon harvests, bannermen, justice, and the long peace that had followed Robert's victory. Southern intrigues interested him very little. When the royal procession finally appeared beneath Winterfell's gates, accompanied by Queen Cersei, Prince Joffrey, Princess Myrcella, Prince Tommen, Jaime Lannister, Sandor Clegane, and much of the royal household, two very different political cultures met face to face. Cersei immediately recognized both the danger and the opportunity. She knew Ned's reputation as surely as everyone else in Westeros did. Here stood the man who had lifted the siege of Storm's End, ridden into the Tower of Joy, returned the ancestral sword Dawn to House Dayne after Sir Arthur Dayne's death, and earned respect even from former enemies. Unlike Robert, Ned noticed details. Unlike many courtiers, he could not be bought with titles or flattery. If Jon Arryn had truly uncovered the secret of her children's parentage before dying, then placing Eddard Stark in the office of Hand threatened to revive the investigation from the very beginning. One meeting during the royal visit quietly reveals how differently Cersei viewed the world. Bran Stark climbed the abandoned tower and accidentally witnessed Jaime and Cersei together in unmistakably intimate circumstances. Jaime pushed the boy from the window after uttering the chilling words, "The things I do for love." The fall should have killed Bran outright, yet he survived with grievous injuries after landing upon the ground below. In the novels, Cersei later reflects upon the incident with frustration rather than panic. Her concern centers less upon guilt than upon the enormous risk created by chance. One unexpected witness had nearly undone nearly 2 decades of careful concealment. Why does this episode matter when asking whether Cersei was the smartest player in the game? Because intelligence often reveals itself in preparation for unlikely dangers, yet even the finest preparation cannot eliminate accident. Bran was never supposed to climb that tower. Jon Arryn was never supposed to connect the genealogies. Eddard Stark was never supposed to replace the dead hand. None of these events emerged from Cersei's own planning. They arrived from outside, one after another, testing whether the political structure she had spent years building could survive the unpredictable nature of the world itself. As the royal caravan departs, winter fell beneath gray northern skies. Wagons creak southward along the King's Road while ravens circle above the castle walls. Robert sees only the beginning of a long journey home. Ned believes he is accepting an old friend's request. Cersei watches the road ahead with different eyes. Somewhere beyond those distant hills lies King's Landing, where every answer Jon Arryn failed to speak aloud still waits to be discovered, and where the game she has quietly mastered is about to become impossible to hide. Why did Cersei choose to speak honestly to Eddard Stark at the very moment when deception seemed far safer? Few conversations in the history of Westeros carry greater consequences than the private meeting between the Queen and the Hand in the Godswood of the Red Keep. By the time they faced one another beneath the ancient trees, Eddard had already retraced Jon Arryn's investigation, questioned armorers, examined royal bastards, studied Grand Maester Mallion's genealogies, and reached the same unavoidable conclusion. Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen were not Robert Baratheon's children. The secret that had survived for almost 2 decades now rested in the hands of the most honorable lord in the Seven Kingdoms. Eddard's investigation had unfolded with remarkable patience. He first questioned Tobho Mott, the master armorer who had apprenticed the blacksmith's boy Gendry, one of Robert's acknowledged bastards. Gendry possessed the unmistakable black hair and powerful build associated with House Baratheon. Ned later met the infant Bera in a brothel, another child fathered by Robert, whose dark features reinforced the same pattern. He spoke with servants, examined records, and slowly assembled a picture that matched Jon Arryn's dying words perfectly. The evidence relied not upon rumor or confession, but upon inherited blood. At the same time, Cersei watched the Hand with equal care. She noticed which people he visited, which questions he asked, and how often he returned to the royal library. Unlike Robert, she understood that Eddard Stark rarely acted without purpose. The Queen had spent years surviving inside a court where information traveled faster than ravens. Her own household contained eyes and ears. Varys's little birds whispered through hidden passages. Peter Baelish collected secrets almost as naturally as breathing. By the time Ned requested a private meeting, Cersei already knew that ignorance was no longer an option. Why then did she admit the truth instead of denying everything? Because Cersei recognized something fundamental about Eddard Stark's character. She knew he valued mercy alongside justice. Rather than challenge his evidence, she appealed to his compassion. During their meeting, she openly acknowledged that Robert had never fathered her children and that Jaime alone was their true father. In one of the most famous exchanges from A Game of Thrones, when Ned asked whether Robert had ever known, she answered simply that he had not. There was no elaborate excuse. There was only acceptance of reality. That conversation also contains one of Cersei's clearest statements about power itself. When Eddard warned her that Robert would kill her, Jaime, and the children if he learned the truth, she urged him instead to take his daughters and flee the city before Robert returned from the hunt. She understood exactly what would happen if the king lived long enough to hear Ned's accusation. Then came the line that has echoed through every discussion of her character. When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground. The words are often quoted as if they celebrate ambition alone. In context, they describe survival. The statement reveals something essential about Cersei's political philosophy. Unlike Ned, who believed justice could exist independently of power, Cersei believed power determined whether justice mattered at all. She had watched Aerys II lose everything despite possessing legal authority. She had watched Robert become king through victory rather than inheritance. She'd watched Tywin arrive at King's Landing only after deciding the outcome of the rebellion was certain. To her, morality without strength invited destruction. Every lesson of her life seemed to confirm it. Why did Eddard refuse the simpler path before him? Robert had not yet returned from his hunt. Cersei herself offered to leave King's Landing with her children, removing the immediate threat of civil war. Had she truly fled across the narrow sea, events might have unfolded very differently. Yet Eddard could not abandon what he believed duty required. His promise to protect innocent children extended even to Cersei's sons and daughter, but he also believed Robert deserved the truth. Honor demanded openness where calculation recommended silence. That choice illustrates the profound difference between these two remarkable players. Cersei judged actions by outcomes. Ned judged them by principles. Neither lacked intelligence, neither misunderstood the stakes. They simply measured success according to different standards. Martin never portrays one worldview as completely victorious. Instead, he allows them to collide with tragic force, showing how honor can become vulnerable inside a political system that rewards speed more readily than virtue. While this private confrontation unfolded, another plot quietly approached its decisive moment. Robert Baratheon had departed for a royal hunt in the Kingswood, accompanied by members of his household and Kingsguard. Hunting had always been among his greatest pleasures, offering temporary escape from petitions, council meetings, and family tensions. Cersei did not accompany him. Instead, she remained in King's Landing while her cousin, Sir Lancel Lannister, served the king during the expedition. Lancel's role appeared entirely ordinary to outside observers. In reality, he became one of the smallest yet most important pieces in the Queen's defense. The novels make clear that Cersei instructed Lancel to keep Robert heavily supplied with strong wine during the hunt. She did not order an assassin to strike the king down. She did not poison his cup. Instead, she encouraged habits Robert already possessed in abundance. Wine dulled judgment, slowed reflexes, and encouraged recklessness. When the great boar finally charged, Robert faced it while badly intoxicated. Even then, he fought with extraordinary courage, killing the animal despite receiving wounds that proved fatal. The king who had slain Prince Rhaegar at the Trident died battling a beast rather than an enemy army. This distinction matters because it demonstrates Cersei's preferred method of removing obstacles. Direct violence always carried enormous risks. An obvious assassination could unite the realm against House Lannister. Encouraging Robert's existing weaknesses required far less exposure. If the hunt ended safely, nothing changed. If Robert died through what appeared to be misfortune, the succession could proceed immediately. Cersei did not control every detail of the event, but she positioned circumstances in her favor before chance made its decision. Why does Robert's death often overshadow the brilliance of what came next? Because many readers naturally focus upon the hunt itself rather than the astonishing speed with which Cersei moved afterward. The moment news reached King's Landing, she began securing the succession before grief had time to settle over the court. Loyal guards received new orders. Access to the royal chambers tightened. Messages traveled between trusted allies. Joffrey stood ready to inherit before many nobles had even accepted that Robert was truly dying. The hunt had removed the king. The real contest for the kingdom was only beginning. As the sun sinks beyond the western hills and shadows lengthen across the Kingswood, Robert Baratheon lies bleeding beside the carcass of the boar that will carry him into history. Far away, the towers of the Red Keep glow red beneath the evening light, and a queen waits with remarkable calm. Others will soon mourn a fallen king. Cersei's attention has already shifted to the next dawn because she understands that the most dangerous hours in any kingdom come not with death itself, but with the empty throne left behind. Why did Eddard Stark lose when he possessed the truth, the king's final command, and the legal authority of the hand? On paper, almost every advantage appeared to belong to him. Robert Baratheon lay dying after the boar hunt, yet before his death, he dictated his final will, naming Eddard Stark, protector of the realm until my heir came of age. Ned quietly altered a single phrase, replacing my son Joffrey with my heir. Knowing Joffrey was not Robert's son at all. The document bore the king's seal, the testimony of witnesses, and the authority of the crown itself. Even so, within days, Ned would be wearing chains beneath the Red Keep. Robert's last hours reveal much about the man behind the crown. Gravely wounded, feverish, and fully aware that death approached, he spoke with unusual honesty. He regretted many choices made during his reign. He admitted that he had failed the kingdom and failed his oldest friend. When he asked Ned to help Joffrey become a good king, he did so believing the boy carried his own blood. That misunderstanding gives the scene much of its quiet tragedy. Robert died, never learning that the succession he sought to secure rested upon a false foundation. After the king's death, the struggle shifted immediately from law to action. Ned intended to reveal the truth before the small council, proclaim Stannis Baratheon the rightful king under the laws of inheritance, and take custody of Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen until the succession could be resolved. Stannis, as Robert's eldest surviving brother, possessed the strongest legal claim once the royal children were recognized as illegitimate. Renly Baratheon understood the danger before anyone else. During the night, he urged Ned to seize Cersei and the children at once with the support of his own household guards. Ned refused. Why did Ned reject Renly's proposal when it might have succeeded? because he would not begin a lawful succession by abducting children in the darkness. His principles, consistent from Winterfell to King's Landing, demanded that justice remain visible. He wished to avoid unnecessary bloodshed and believed that legitimacy required open process rather than sudden violence. Renly saw politics as a race measured in hours. Ned saw it as a matter of right conduct. Once again, both men understood the danger. They simply measured acceptable action by different standards. Cersei, meanwhile, wasted none of those precious hours. She already knew Robert was dead. She knew Eddard had discovered the truth. She also understood that uncertainty favors the side willing to move first. The Queen immediately secured the loyalty of the royal household, placed Joffrey at the center of events, and ensured that members of the Kingsguard remained close to her son. Most importantly, she never allowed the question of succession to remain unanswered. Before anyone could debate who ought to rule, she presented Westeros with someone who already did. The morning meeting in the throne room stands among the defining political scenes of the novels. Present were Queen Cersei, Prince Joffrey, members of the Kingsguard, including Sir Barristan Selmy, the Small Council, and Eddard Stark, carrying Robert's sealed will. Ned presented the document and declared that, according to the king's command, he would govern as protector of the realm until the lawful succession had been settled. Cersei did not argue over wording. She simply tore the parchment into pieces before the assembled court. The gesture announced that force, not paper, would decide what happened next. Many readers remember the dramatic destruction of Robert's will, yet the more significant moment followed immediately afterward. Joffrey seated himself upon the Iron Throne before any formal legal dispute had even begun. That image carried enormous symbolic power. In a feudal society, appearance often shaped belief. Lords entering the throne room no longer encountered an uncertain succession. They encountered a king already occupying his father's seat. Cersei understood that people frequently accepted accomplished facts more readily than unresolved debates. Why did the City Watch betray Eddard Stark after he believed their loyalty had been secured? The answer lies with Petyr Baelish, perhaps the finest manipulator of personal ambition in King's Landing. Earlier, Baelish had assured Ned that Janos Slynt, commander of the City Watch, could be trusted if properly rewarded. Gold cloaks greatly outnumbered the Stark guards accompanying the hand. Ned accepted Baelish's assurances, despite privately distrusting him. It became one of the costliest judgments of his life. When the moment arrived, Janos Slynt declared for Joffrey rather than for the protector of the realm. The gold cloaks turned their spears against the Stark household. Sir Barristan Selmy hesitated, unwilling to stain his honor without certainty. Petyr Baelish approached Ned quietly and pressed a dagger beneath his chin. His whispered words became another of the novel's unforgettable lines. "I did warn you not to trust me." Within moments, Jory Cassell and many Stark men lay dead. Eddard Stark himself became a prisoner of the crown. This betrayal often overshadows Cersei's own achievement, yet the two cannot be separated. Baelish certainly engineered Ned's immediate downfall, but he acted because the Queen already controlled the political center of the capital. Had she failed to secure Joffrey's claim quickly, Baelish would have possessed far less certainty about where advantage lay. Cersei created the conditions in which opportunists chose her side. She did not need to command every move personally. She needed only to ensure that supporting her appeared safer than resisting her. Another important detail deserves attention. Varys did not intervene to save Ned despite privately advising mercy throughout much of the crisis. His interests differed from both Stark and Lannister ambitions. Throughout the novels, Varys works toward the eventual restoration of the young man he presents as Prince Aegon Targaryen, known to readers as Young Griff. A prolonged struggle among the great houses weakened every existing claimant to the Iron Throne. From that perspective, preserving instability served Varys remarkably well. Once again, multiple conspiracies overlapped without requiring direct cooperation. Why does this sequence strengthen the argument that Cersei was among the smartest political players rather than weaken it? Because she recognized a truth many idealists overlooked. Institutions only function when people choose to defend them. Robert's will possessed authority because men believed in it. The office of protector possessed authority because soldiers obeyed it. The moment the gold cloaks, the royal household, and enough influential courtiers accepted Joffrey's immediate rule, legal arguments rapidly lost their practical value. Cersei did not defeat law by proving it wrong. She defeated it by moving faster than it could be enforced. As evening settles over King's Landing once more, the Iron Throne stands occupied by a boy in a golden crown, while ravens depart the Red Keep, carrying news in every direction. One flies toward Dragonstone, where Stannis Baratheon will soon learn that his lawful inheritance has slipped beyond reach. Another heads north, carrying sorrow toward Winterfell. Deep beneath the castle, Eddard Stark sits, alone in darkness, still possessing the truth, but no longer possessing the power to make the realm believe it. Why did Cersei's greatest victory produce the largest war Westeros had seen since Robert's rebellion? At first glance, everything she wanted seemed to have been achieved. Robert Baratheon was dead. Joffrey sat upon the Iron Throne. Eddard Stark languished in a black cell beneath the Red Keep. The royal treasury, the city watch, the King's Guard, and the machinery of government remained in Lannister hands. Yet the very speed of that success concealed a deeper danger. Cersei had secured King's Landing, but she had not secured the realm. Across the Seven Kingdoms, the political map shifted with astonishing speed. On Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon declared himself the lawful king according to the laws of succession, publicly revealing the incest between Cersei and Jaime and proclaiming Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen to be illegitimate. At Storm's End, Renly Baratheon rejected his elder brother's claim and crowned himself instead, relying upon charisma, popularity, and the immense military support of House Tyrell and many Storm Lords. In the north, Robb Stark called his banners after his father's imprisonment. In the Iron Islands, Balon Greyjoy watched events unfold with growing interest, waiting for opportunity. Within weeks, Robert's United Kingdom had fractured into rival courts. Cersei understood immediately that legitimacy alone would no longer decide the future. Every claimant possessed at least one convincing argument. Stannis had law, Renly had numbers, Robb had northern loyalty. Joffrey controlled the capital and wore the crown. Westeros had entered what historians would later call the War of the Five Kings, a conflict shaped as much by perception as by military strength. Whoever could survive the first months stood the greatest chance of surviving the war itself. Why then did Cersei insist that Joffrey be crowned immediately, instead of delaying the ceremony until opposition could be contained, because delay creates uncertainty, and uncertainty invites rivals. The coronation took place inside the Great Sept of Baelor, where the High Septon anointed Joffrey before the assembled court. Golden banners bearing the crowned stag and lion flew above King's Landing. Trumpets announced continuity rather than crisis. To the common people crowding the streets, there appeared to be no empty throne at all. One king had died, another already ruled. The symbolism mattered more than many modern readers first appreciate. In a feudal kingdom, ceremonies possessed political force. Lords swore oaths publicly, septons blessed rulers before the eyes of the faith, heralds proclaimed titles so that memory itself became difficult to reverse. Every day Joffrey remained visibly king, made it harder for uncertain bannermen to reject him. Cersei appreciated this instinctively. A crown, seen by thousands, became easier to defend than a legal argument known only to scholars and counselors. Yet almost immediately, another challenge emerged from inside the Red Keep itself. Tyrion Lannister had remained at the inn at the crossroads before traveling separately to King's Landing after escaping his arrest by Catelyn Stark and surviving the fighting in the Mountains of the Moon alongside Bronn and the Mountain clans. Although absent during Robert's death and Ned's downfall, he represented something Cersei disliked profoundly. Tyrion questioned assumptions. He noticed waste. He preferred evidence over appearances. Most importantly, he possessed the same political instincts that she believed should have belonged only to herself. Even before Tyrion arrived, Cersei had already begun exercising influence through the small council. Grand Maester Pycelle generally supported Lannister interests, though often while pretending complete neutrality. Lord Peter Baelish continued managing the crown's finances, despite debts that had grown enormously during Robert's reign. Varys remained outwardly loyal to the throne while pursuing hidden purposes known only to himself. Sir Barristan Selmy still commanded enormous respect as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. These men did not form a united government. They formed competing centers of influence, each pursuing different objectives beneath the appearance of cooperation. Why did Cersei repeatedly underestimate Varys while focusing so intensely upon Littlefinger and Tyrion? One explanation lies in visibility. Baelish openly displayed wit, ambition, and confidence. Tyrion challenged her directly whenever they met. Varys, by contrast, wrapped himself in silk robes, soft laughter, and exaggerated humility. He rarely appeared threatening because he carefully cultivated that impression. Yet the master of whisperers knew the movements of merchants, sellswords, exiles, priests, captains, and princes stretching from Dorne to Pentos. His greatest talent lay in convincing others that information alone was harmless. Another figure also deserves attention during these early weeks, Sir Barristan Selmy. Renowned throughout Westeros as Barristan the Bold, he had served under Kings Jaehaerys II, Aerys II, Robert I, and now Joffrey. His reputation rested upon unwavering honor and astonishing martial skill, demonstrated at battles, including the War of the Ninepenny Kings, decades earlier. Cersei respected his ability but never entirely trusted his independence. Barristan served the crown itself rather than the family occupying it. To someone who viewed loyalty through the lens of blood and survival, Such impartial devotion could become unpredictable. Meanwhile, the Riverlands had already begun burning. Before Robert's death, Sir Gregor Clegane, acting under secret instructions from Tywin Lannister according to later revelations, had raided villages along the Trident in retaliation for Tyrion's capture by Catelyn Stark. Lords sent desperate petitions to the Iron Throne, asking for justice. Eddard Stark, while still hand, had declared Sir Gregor an outlaw and ordered Beric Dondarrion to bring him to justice. Those commands now became politically inconvenient for the new regime. Cersei inherited not only a crown, but a conflict that was already spreading beyond anyone's original intentions. Why does this moment reveal both the brilliance and the limitation of Cersei's strategy? Because she excelled at securing immediate control, while often assuming that political victories inside the capital would naturally reshape the rest of the kingdom. King's Landing remained firmly under her authority. The Red Keep obeyed her. Joffrey occupied the throne, yet castles hundreds of miles away answered to different priorities. River Run followed House Tully, Winterfell followed House Stark, Dragonstone followed Stannis, Highgarden watched carefully before committing fully. The Iron Throne looked powerful from within its own walls, but outside those walls the map had already begun breaking apart. Then came the decision that altered everything beyond recovery. After weeks in captivity, Eddard Stark agreed to confess publicly that Joffrey was the rightful king, hoping to save his daughters and earn permission to take the Black as a brother of the Night's Watch. Varys encouraged the arrangement. Cersei accepted it. Members of the small council believed the crisis could finally end without further bloodshed. Before the steps of the Great Sept of Baelor, Ned confessed as agreed. And then, before anyone present could intervene, King Joffrey ignored the carefully negotiated plan and ordered Sir Ilyn Payne to strike off Eddard Stark's head. As the executioner's great sword fell beneath the shadow of Baelor's marble dome, the silence that followed lasted only a heartbeat before the crowd erupted into confusion. Somewhere within the Red Keep, Cersei learned that the bargain she had approved no longer existed. A single impulsive command from her son had accomplished what none of her enemies had yet managed. It transformed a dangerous political dispute into a war that would consume almost every great house in Westeros. Why did Cersei lose control of the very king she had worked so carefully to place upon the Iron Throne? The execution of Eddard Stark marked more than the death of one honorable lord. It exposed a weakness at the center of Cersei's political system that would return again and again throughout her life. She had mastered the art of securing power, but exercising that power through another person proved far more difficult. Joffrey wore the crown she had won. He did not always obey the woman who had placed it upon his head. The books leave little doubt that Cersei opposed Ned's execution. Varys had negotiated the confession. Members of the small council expected the former hand to take the Black. Even Cersei understood that allowing Eddard Stark to join the Night's Watch would remove him permanently from politics while reducing the likelihood of northern rebellion. Instead, Joffrey interrupted the carefully arranged settlement and ordered Sir Ilyn Payne, the king's justice, to carry out the sentence immediately. Sir Ilyn, mute since losing his tongue during the reign of Aerys II, obeyed without hesitation, One impulsive command undid weeks of calculated planning. The consequences spread across Westeros with astonishing speed. At River Run, Robb Stark had already won important victories against House Lannister. He defeated Sir Jaime Lannister during the Battle of the Whispering Wood and captured him alive, while the Battle of the Camps forced Tywin's forces away from River Run and relieved the siege of House Tully's ancestral seat. News of Eddard's execution transformed a war fought for justice into a war for independence. Soon afterward, the Northern Lords and River Lords proclaimed Robb as king in the north, reviving a royal title that had vanished since Torrhen Stark bent the knee to Aegon the Conqueror nearly 3 centuries earlier. Why did Joffrey ignore the advice of nearly every experienced counselor surrounding him? The answer lies partly in upbringing and partly in temperament. Throughout his childhood, few people consistently denied him anything. Robert showed little interest in shaping his eldest supposed son. Cersei loved him fiercely, but often confused protection with indulgence, shielding him from consequences rather than teaching restraint. The result was a boy who mistook fear for respect and believed kingship meant the freedom to satisfy every impulse. Even so, reducing Joffrey to simple cruelty overlooks an important political reality. Kings in Westeros possessed extraordinary legal authority. Aerys II had demonstrated how destructive an unstable monarch could become when no one successfully restrained him. Joffrey inherited many of the same institutional powers without inheriting the experience needed to use them wisely. Cersei increasingly found herself in the impossible position of governing through a sovereign who possessed greater formal authority than she did, despite relying almost entirely upon her guidance. The crown gave Joffrey the right to command. It did not give Cersei the right to overrule him publicly. Why did Tywin Lannister not immediately return to King's Landing and assume direct control? Because the war demanded his presence elsewhere. At the beginning of the conflict, Tywin commanded the principal Lannister field army in the Riverlands. After learning of Jaime's capture, he faced immediate strategic decisions involving River Run, Harrenhal, and the advancing northern forces. A king could be advised from afar. A defeated army could not easily be replaced. Tywin therefore entrusted much of the political management of the capital to Cersei, while he attempted to preserve Lannister military strength in the field. This temporary separation reveals another overlooked aspect of Cersei's intelligence. For the first time since Robert's death, she effectively became the central political authority inside King's Landing. Petitioners approached the throne through her. Household appointments passed through her influence. Diplomatic correspondence required her attention. Although Joffrey occupied the throne ceremonially, experienced courtiers quickly recognized that the Queen Regent remained the person most capable of maintaining continuity. The arrangement was imperfect, but it functioned well enough to keep the capital stable while armies marched elsewhere. One figure, however, viewed these developments with growing concern. Tyrion Lannister received word of the unfolding crisis while still at the crossroads between the Vale and the Riverlands. His father, recognizing that King's Landing required firmer leadership than Joffrey or Cersei alone could provide, made a decisive choice. Tyrion would travel to the capital as acting hand of the king, carrying Tywin's authority until the Lord of Casterly Rock could come himself. The appointment surprised nearly everyone, including Tyrion. It infuriated Cersei before he even arrived. Why would Tywin entrust the government of the realm to the son he so openly despised? The answer illustrates Tywin's remarkable ability to separate personal resentment from practical necessity. He considered Tyrion embarrassing, disobedient, and morally flawed. Yet he also knew that Tyrion possessed a sharp political mind, considerable courage under pressure, and the ability to recognize problems others ignored. Tywin rarely rewarded affection. He rewarded usefulness. At that particular moment, usefulness mattered more than pride. The arrival of Tyrion in King's Landing dramatically altered the balance inside the Red Keep. Unlike Eddard Stark, Tyrion understood the city's hidden networks before assuming authority. He immediately cultivated Bronn, strengthened the loyalty of the City Watch through strategic appointments, dismissed Janos Slynt for his treachery during Ned's arrest, and elevated Sir Jacelyn Bywater as the new commander of the Gold Cloaks. He also began quietly testing members of the small council by feeding each a different false story concerning Princess Myrcella's proposed marriage. When identical information eventually reached Cersei through Grand Maester Pycelle, Tyrion confirmed that Pycelle had been secretly reporting to the Queen. This famous deception demonstrated Tyrion's analytical style while highlighting Cersei's own dependence upon informal channels of information. She had built an impressive intelligence network inside the Red Keep, but she assumed those channels remained invisible. Tyrion exposed them within days. He arrested Pycelle, stripped him of office temporarily, and confined him to a cell, shocking much of the court. Although Pycelle would later be restored, the incident showed that the political struggle inside King's Landing had entered a new phase. Cersei no longer faced honorable opponents who announced their intentions openly. She now faced someone willing to play the same intricate game she believed she understood better than anyone else. Why is this rivalry so important when considering whether Cersei was among the smartest players in Westeros? Because it is one of the rare moments when two exceptionally intelligent members of the same family attempt to outmaneuver each other using nearly identical methods. Both relied upon spies, both manipulated appointments, both understood symbolism, secrecy, and timing. Their differences lay elsewhere. Tyrion generally sought information before acting. Cersei often trusted instinct once she believed she understood an opponent. Sometimes that instinct proved brilliantly accurate. At other times, it encouraged dangerous certainty. Night settles once again over the Red Keep, and torchlight dances across walls that have witnessed Targaryen kings, Baratheon conquerors, and now a young Lannister monarch seated uneasily upon the Iron Throne. Somewhere within the castle, Cersei studies reports arriving from distant battlefields, while another set of footsteps echoes through the corridors. Her younger brother has entered the capital at last. The enemies beyond the city walls remain formidable, but an equally dangerous contest is about to begin inside the royal family itself. Why did one of Cersei's greatest political rivals turn out to be her own brother rather than any king marching against King's Landing? From the moment Tyrion Lannister entered the capital as acting hand of the king, the conflict inside the Red Keep became almost as important as the war outside its walls. Stannis Baratheon gathered ships on Dragonstone, Robb Stark won victories in the Riverlands. Renly Baratheon attracted the largest army in Westeros beneath the banners of House Tyrell and House Baratheon. Yet every decision affecting the defense of the capital now depended upon two exceptionally intelligent Lannisters who trusted each other less than they trusted most of their declared enemies. Tyrion's authority rested entirely upon Tywin Lannister's command. Before remaining with the Western host, Tywin instructed his youngest son to rule in his place until he could return. Cersei deeply resented this arrangement because she believed government belonged naturally to the Queen Regent. While her son was underage, Tyrion disagreed. He viewed the office of Hand as carrying practical authority regardless of personal feelings. Their struggle, therefore, never centered only upon family resentment. It became a constitutional contest hidden inside a civil war. One of Tyrion's earliest actions struck directly at Cersei's network. He dismissed Janos Slynt from command of the City Watch, rewarded Sir Jacelyn Bywater with leadership of the Gold Cloaks, and sent Slynt into exile at the Wall with the Night's Watch. The decision carried several advantages at once. It punished treachery, weakened Cersei's influence over the city garrison, and placed a more disciplined commander in charge of nearly 2,000 watchmen. Tyrion understood that whoever controlled the gates of King's Landing controlled the city's survival long before armies appeared outside its walls. Why did Cersei react so fiercely when Tyrion sent Princess Myrcella to Dorne? This dispute reveals one of the deepest differences between the siblings. Tyrion proposed marrying Myrcella to Prince Trystane Martell, youngest son of Prince Doran Martell of Sunspear. The alliance offered important strategic benefits. House Martell had never forgotten the murders of Princess Aelia Martell and her children during the sack of King's Landing in 283 AC. Winning Dorne's neutrality, or even cautious support, reduced the number of enemies surrounding the Iron Throne. Tyrion judged the political calculation sound. Cersei saw only a daughter being taken away from her. The emotional intensity of Cersei's response often obscures an important fact. Tyrion's plan succeeded politically. Myrcella departed safely under the protection of Sir Aerys Oakheart of the Kingsguard, and Dorne remained outside the fighting during the early stages of the War of the Five Kings. Prince Doran Martell continued pursuing his own patient designs rather than immediately joining Stannis, Renly, Robb, or the Iron Throne. The arrangement bought valuable time, yet it also deepened Cersei's conviction that Tyrion deliberately sought to wound her personally whenever possible. This pattern appears repeatedly throughout A Clash of Kings. Tyrion viewed royal children as diplomatic assets whose marriages could stabilize kingdoms. Cersei viewed them first as her family. Neither perspective was entirely irrational. Dynastic politics had always depended upon marriages arranged for strategic advantage. At the same time, Martin consistently reminds readers that rulers remain parents, siblings, husbands, and wives beneath their titles. Cersei's fierce attachment to Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen became both her greatest strength and one of her greatest vulnerabilities. Why did Tyrion trust Bronn more readily than many highborn knights sworn by noble vows? The answer reflects his unusually practical understanding of loyalty. Bronn never pretended to serve ideals. He served reward, survival, and mutual benefit. Tyrion preferred an honest sellsword to a dishonest courtier. Because Bronn's motivations remained visible, he rewarded competence generously and expected competence in return. Cersei, by contrast, often assumed blood ties guaranteed loyalty even when experience repeatedly suggested otherwise. Meanwhile, the greatest military threat continued growing across Blackwater Bay. After the mysterious death of Renly Baratheon beneath Storm's End, an event the novels attribute to the shadow assassin born from Melisandre's magic and Stannis' life force, much of Renly's army transferred its allegiance to House Tyrell rather than immediately supporting Stannis. Sir Loras Tyrell blamed Brienne of Tarth for Renly's death and fled with overwhelming grief and fury. The political consequences proved even more significant than the personal tragedy. Stannis gained Storm's End but failed to inherit the full strength of Renly's host. The Tyrells instead began quietly reconsidering their alliances. Tyrion recognized another danger that Cersei largely underestimated: the city's own population. King's Landing had swollen enormously during the war as refugees fled burned villages throughout the Riverlands and Crownlands. Food prices rose sharply. Bread became scarce. Rumors spread faster than official proclamations. Hungry crowds cared little for questions of legal succession. They wanted safety and grain. Tyrion spent increasing effort strengthening the city's defenses because he understood that a siege threatened not only walls, but public order. Why did Cersei continue insisting that appearances mattered while Tyrion focused upon engineering? The answer becomes visible in the preparations for Stannis' expected attack. Tyrion personally inspected the city walls, the Mud Gate, the King's Gate, and the river defenses. He oversaw the construction of an enormous chain stretching across the mouth of the Blackwater Rush, designed to trap enemy ships once they entered the harbor. At the same time, he worked closely with the Guild of Alchemists, whose stores of wildfire had expanded dramatically under the leadership of Hallyne the Pyromancer. Cersei devoted greater attention to court politics, morale, and preserving royal authority. Both forms of preparation mattered. Tyrion simply concentrated upon the battlefield that was approaching fastest. The wildfire itself deserves careful attention because it belonged to one of the oldest and most terrifying weapons in Westeros. Created by the Alchemists Guild through closely guarded methods dating back to the Targaryen era, the emerald substance burned upon water, stone, flesh, and wood alike. King Aerys II had secretly hidden vast caches beneath King's Landing, while planning to destroy the entire city rather than surrender to Robert Baratheon. Jaime Lannister killed him before that command could be carried out. Tyrion now intended to use newly produced wildfire in a far more controlled fashion against Stannis' fleet. The same substance that had nearly annihilated the capital would instead become its shield. Why does this period strengthen rather than weaken the case for Cersei's intelligence? Because even while disagreeing with Tyrion almost daily, she never stopped recognizing the true scale of the crisis. She understood that if Stannis captured King's Landing, the fate awaiting House Lannister would almost certainly resemble the destruction visited upon defeated dynasties throughout Westerosi history. Her methods often clashed with Tyrion's. Her priorities frequently differed from his. Yet beneath every argument lay the same determination. The city must not fall, and her children must survive whatever storm approached from the sea. As gray clouds gather above Blackwater Bay, fishermen pull their boats farther inland, while lookouts scan the eastern horizon from the towers overlooking the harbor. Deep within the Red Keep, maps cover tables beside half-burned candles, and every messenger seems to arrive carrying darker news than the last. Beyond the city's walls, Stannis Baratheon's banners are drawing steadily closer. Inside those walls, brother and sister continue their silent contest, unaware that before long the coming battle will force both of them to depend upon each other more than either would willingly admit. Why did Cersei prepare for death instead of planning an escape when Stannis Baratheon's fleet finally appeared off King's Landing? At first glance, the decision seems almost impossible to reconcile with everything we know about her determination to survive. She'd spent years protecting her children, manipulating succession, and preserving Lannister rule. Yet as the greatest naval assault since Robert's rebellion approached the Blackwater Rush, Cersei devoted as much thought to a dignified end as to victory. The answer reveals one of the deepest truths about her character. She feared humiliation and captivity far more than death itself. By the time Stannis launched his campaign against the capital, he had assembled the largest fleet in the war. Dragonstone, Driftmark, Claw Isle, and many Crown Lands houses loyal to his cause contributed ships. Salad Horsan, the Lysine pirate prince, commanded a substantial portion of the fleet under contract with Stannis. Thousands of soldiers crossed Blackwater Bay carrying scaling ladders, siege equipment, and confidence born from discipline. Unlike Robert, Stannis neither celebrated nor inspired through charm. His strength lay in relentless preparation and obedience. Every captain in his fleet understood precisely what was expected. Inside King's Landing, Tyrion recognized that the city's walls alone would not hold forever. He ordered the great harbor chain completed in secret beneath the Tower of the Hand, hidden from enemy observers. Massive windlasses and iron mechanisms stood ready to lift the chain across the mouth of the Blackwater Rush at the decisive moment. Meanwhile, hundreds of jars filled with wildfire were prepared by Hallyne and the Alchemists Guild. These were not the forgotten caches hidden by Aerys II beneath streets and towers decades earlier. They were newly manufactured stores intended for one specific battle. Tyrion gambled everything upon surprise. Cersei, however, faced a different battlefield. While Tyrion supervised engineers, smiths, sailors, and soldiers, she remained responsible for the royal family and the court. Queen Regent, ladies-in-waiting, noble hostages, royal children, servants, septas, and frightened attendants all looked toward her once rumors spread that Stannis had entered Blackwater Bay. Panic can destroy a city long before enemy troops breach its gates. Cersei therefore maintained outward composure even as reports arriving from the walls grew steadily darker. Calm itself became one of her political weapons. Why did she gather the noble women inside Maegor's holdfast instead of attempting to evacuate them from the city? Because there was nowhere safer to send them. Maegor's holdfast stood at the heart of the Red Keep, protected by thick walls, drawbridges, murder holes, and concentric defenses built after the assassination of Maegor the Cruel. If the outer city fell, the defenders could still retreat into the castle. If the castle fell, no road remained open. Cersei understood that escape through streets filled with rioting citizens and enemy soldiers offered almost no chance of survival. The safest refuge was also the last refuge. Martin's portrayal of Cersei during the Battle of the Blackwater differs in subtle but important ways from simplified popular memory. She does not collapse into helplessness, nor does she personally command armies. Instead, she assumes responsibility for maintaining order among those least capable of defending themselves. She keeps Queen Sansa Stark close, though Sansa herself quietly observes the fear spreading through the gathered ladies. Septas pray aloud. Noble women whisper rumors. Cups of wine pass from trembling hands to unsteady lips. Above them, every distant horn blast echoes through the stone. One of the most revealing moments occurs when Cersei speaks candidly about the fate awaiting captured queens. Westerosi history provided grim precedents. During civil wars and rebellions, defeated royal women often became prisoners, bargaining pieces, or victims of vengeance. Cersei had not forgotten what happened during the sack of King's Landing to Princess Elia Martell and her children. Nor had she forgotten that victorious armies did not always obey the ideals proclaimed by their commanders. If Stannis prevailed, there existed no guarantee that mercy would follow. In her mind, preparing for the worst was not despair, it was realism. Why did she keep poison close to Prince Tommen? This is among the darkest yet most revealing decisions Cersei ever contemplates. She believed that if defeat became inevitable, a quick death by poison would spare her youngest son from torture, public humiliation, or execution. In the novels, she considers this possibility with terrible clarity. Rather than emotional confusion, it is not presented as cruelty toward Tommen. It is presented as the final expression of a mother's determination to control what little remained under her authority. Love and ruthlessness become almost impossible to separate. While these quiet scenes unfolded within the Red Keep, the battle outside erupted with astonishing violence. Stannis' fleet entered the mouth of the Blackwater Rush, expecting a direct assault upon the harbor. Tyrion then ordered a single wildfire ship released into the midst of the attacking vessels. Moments later, the harbor exploded in brilliant green flame. Fire raced across the water itself, consuming warships, sailors, oars, rigging, and screaming men unable to extinguish the unnatural blaze. When the harbor chain rose behind them, dozens of trapped ships became floating furnaces. It remains one of the most devastating naval actions recorded in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. Yet even this extraordinary success failed to end the battle. Stannis himself survived the destruction of much of his fleet and personally led his soldiers ashore. Unlike many commanders, he fought at the front rather than directing operations safely from the rear. His infantry assaulted the city walls with scaling ladders while rams battered the gates. According to multiple accounts, Stannis came remarkably close to breaking through despite catastrophic losses upon the river. Tyrion himself later acknowledged that the king's determination nearly carried the day. Had only military courage decided the battle, Stannis might well have entered King's Landing before nightfall. Why does Cersei's conduct during these hours deserve closer attention than it often receives? Because she refused to flee, while believing defeat remained possible. Many rulers throughout Westerosi history escaped their capitals at the first sign of danger. Cersei stayed inside the Red Keep with her children. She continued receiving reports, issuing instructions where she could, and preparing for whatever outcome arrived first. Her sphere of influence differed from Tyrion's, but it remained essential. A capital whose royal family abandoned it in panic would likely collapse, even if its walls remained standing. As darkness spreads over Blackwater Bay, the air fills with the smell of smoke, burning pitch, and the strange, sharp scent of wildfire drifting inland from the river. Bells ring across King's Landing without pause. Inside Maegor's holdfast, candles flicker against ancient stone, while a queen sits beside her youngest son, listening to every distant shout. Beyond those walls, the battle has not yet been decided. Within them, Cersei has already reached a decision about the price she is willing to pay if the city falls before dawn. Why did Cersei survive the Battle of the Blackwater only to lose influence almost immediately afterward? Victory usually strengthens those who achieve it. Songs celebrate the triumphant, banners fly higher, and grateful rulers reward loyal servants. Yet the aftermath of the Battle of the Blackwater produced a different outcome inside the Red Keep. The city had been saved, Stannis Baratheon had been driven back to Dragonstone, and House Lannister remained in possession of the Iron Throne. Even so, the balance of power shifted away from Cersei with surprising speed. The decisive moment arrived not on the walls of King's Landing, but upon the King's Road leading toward the capital. Lord Tywin Lannister had marched east after abandoning Harrenhal, joined by the vast strength of House Tyrell. The alliance itself had been negotiated largely through Peter Baelish, who persuaded Lord Mace Tyrell that supporting Joffrey offered greater rewards than backing Renly's dead cause or Stannis's increasingly isolated claim. Alongside Tywin rode Sir Garland Tyrell wearing Renly's distinctive green armor, a calculated deception that convinced many of Stannis's weary soldiers their former king had somehow returned. Whether panic or confusion mattered more, the effect proved devastating. Stannis's army broke and the capital was saved. The victory belonged to many people at once. Tyrion's wildfire and harbor chain shattered the fleet. The city watch and defenders held the walls longer than expected. Sandor Clegane fought fiercely before abandoning the battle in horror of the flames. Stannis himself nearly forced a breakthrough through sheer determination. Finally, Tywin and the Tyrell host struck the exhausted attackers from the rear. Martin deliberately avoids assigning triumph to a single hero. The Blackwater becomes instead a study in overlapping efforts where no one individual could have succeeded alone. Yet public memory rarely preserves such complexity. Songs celebrated Tywin Lannister as the savior of King's Landing because he arrived at the visible climax of the battle. The common people watched his banners enter through the city gates after the danger had passed. They did not witness Tyrion's planning beneath the Tower of the Hand or the long months spent preparing defenses. Cersei immediately recognized what this meant. Her father had returned not merely as a victorious general, but as the unquestioned political center of House Lannister. Why did Tyrion receive so little gratitude despite preventing Stannis from taking the city? The answer reveals one of Tywin's defining characteristics. He rewarded results when useful, but never allowed subordinates to overshadow his own authority. Tyrion had performed brilliantly as acting hand, yet he remained the son Tywin neither respected nor wished to acknowledge publicly. Worse still, Tyrion had suffered a terrible wound during the battle. Sir Mandon Moore of the Kingsguard, almost certainly acting under hidden orders that remain one of the novel's enduring mysteries, attempted to murder him during the fighting. Only Podrick Payne's intervention saved Tyrion's life. By the time he recovered consciousness, the political celebration had already moved forward without him. The identity of whoever directed Mandon Moore remains unresolved in the published novels. Many readers suspect Cersei because she repeatedly considered eliminating Tyrion and feared his growing influence. Others point toward Peter Baelish, whose own ambitions benefited from removing another perceptive rival. Martin has never confirmed the answer. What matters politically is that Tyrion understood he could no longer assume safety, even within his own family's government. Victory had not united House Lannister. It had intensified private rivalries hidden beneath public celebration. Why did Tywin immediately reclaim the office of Hand of the King instead of allowing Cersei to continue governing? From his perspective, the answer required no explanation. He had always viewed himself as the natural architect of Lannister success. Robert Baratheon had relied upon Jon Arryn. Joffrey would rely upon Tywin. The old lion resumed his place at the head of the small council with characteristic efficiency, reviewing finances, military deployments, and diplomatic arrangements, almost before the city finished burying its dead. Cersei remained Queen Regent in name, but practical authority now flowed increasingly through her father. This change affected her more deeply than many of her enemies realized. Throughout her life, Cersei had believed she possessed the same political instincts as Tywin, perhaps even stronger ones. Yet each time genuine authority approached, her father quietly resumed control without openly insulting her. He simply behaved as though command naturally belonged to him. That pattern reinforced the frustration she'd carried since childhood. She had secured Joffrey's crown. Tywin now governed the kingdom wearing no crown at all. Another enormous political reward followed the victory. The alliance between House Lannister and House Tyrell became permanent through marriage negotiations. King Joffrey's earlier betrothal to Sansa Stark was set aside on the grounds of treason after House Stark's rebellion. Instead, Joffrey became betrothed to Marguerite Tyrell, daughter of Lord Mace Tyrell. This union promised food from the fertile Reach, immense military strength, and the wealth of Highgarden. It also introduced a new political force into the Red Keep, one that Cersei would gradually come to fear almost as much as she feared Tyrion. Why did Margaery unsettle Cersei so profoundly before the young Tyrell queen had even exercised real influence? The answer reaches back to the prophecy spoken decades earlier by Maggie the Frog. The old woman's words had promised that another queen, younger and more beautiful, would cast Cersei down and take all that she held dear. Every ambitious noblewoman arriving at court now carried that shadow with her. Margaery possessed youth, beauty, courtesy, intelligence, and the overwhelming support of House Tyrell. Whether or not she truly fulfilled the prophecy almost became irrelevant. Cersei increasingly interpreted every interaction through Maggie's prediction. Tywin, meanwhile, approached the Tyrell alliance with characteristic pragmatism. He saw partners, grain supplies, soldiers, and strategic advantage. Cersei saw potential rivals for her son's affection and her own influence. Their different reactions highlight a subtle but growing divergence between father and daughter. Tywin generally separated political calculation from personal emotion. Cersei found the two increasingly difficult to untangle. Her instincts remained sharp, but prophecy, maternal fear, and accumulated resentment began exerting greater influence over her judgment than they had during Robert's reign. Why does this period mark the beginning of Cersei's decline rather than its conclusion? Because the qualities that brought her success started colliding with circumstances they could no longer fully control. During Robert's reign, she had confronted distracted opponents. During the succession crisis, she had moved faster than Eddard Stark. Now she faced Tyrion's intellect, Tywin's authority, the Tyrells' popularity, Varys' hidden agenda, Littlefinger's relentless ambition, and an increasingly unpredictable king in Joffrey. She remained one of the most formidable players in Westeros. The board itself, however, had become far more crowded. As dawn rises over Blackwater Bay, the river carries away charred timbers from shattered warships, while crows settle upon abandoned siege engines outside the city walls. The bells of victory ring through King's Landing, and the people cheer the men they believe saved them. High above those celebrations, Cersei stands once more at a window overlooking the city she fought so hard to keep. The throne still belongs to her son, yet, for the first time since Robert's death, she senses that winning a kingdom and keeping control of it are not the same challenge at all. Why do so many readers remember Cersei as a poor player when the written canon repeatedly shows her anticipating dangers that others fail to see? The answer lies partly in timing and partly in perspective. Many of her greatest successes occur before the novels begin or during the opening movements of the War of the Five Kings, when she quietly outmaneuvers stronger opponents without receiving credit from history. Her greatest failures, by contrast, unfold publicly through her own point of view chapters in A Feast for Crows, where readers witness every misjudgment directly. Martin allows us to see inside her mind only after her position has already begun to erode. That timing inevitably shapes how she is remembered. Measured purely by accomplishments, Cersei's record deserves closer attention than it often receives. She maintained the secret of her children's true parentage for nearly 2 decades, despite living at the center of the most closely watched court in Westeros. She survived Robert Baratheon's reign without exposure. She prevented Eddard Stark from transferring the throne to Stannis Baratheon, despite Ned possessing the truth and the king's final will. She placed Joffrey securely upon the Iron Throne and held King's Landing together through the opening phase of the War of the Five Kings. Few political figures in the history of the Seven Kingdoms achieved so much before encountering irreversible setbacks. Yet intelligence alone never determines victory in George R.R. Martin's world. Tywin Lannister possessed extraordinary strategic vision, but he failed to understand Tyrion's resentment until it killed him. Prince Rhaegar understood prophecy more deeply than almost anyone alive, yet his decisions helped ignite Robert's rebellion. Stannis Baratheon consistently recognized military realities, but his rigid personality often alienated potential allies. Cersei belongs naturally within this pattern. Her strengths remain genuine, so do the flaws that eventually magnify them into weaknesses. Why did prophecy continue influencing Cersei long after it should have become only a distant childhood memory? The novels repeatedly suggest that Maggie the Frog's words became a lens through which she interpreted every important event. Marguerite Tyrell's arrival at court immediately awakened fears of the younger and more beautiful queen. Tyrion naturally became the suspected Valonqar because he was literally her younger brother. Every coincidence strengthened beliefs already rooted in her imagination. Martin rarely portrays prophecy as unavoidable destiny. Instead, he shows how belief itself alters human behavior until prediction and choice become almost impossible to separate. This distinction separates book Cersei from many simplified interpretations of her character. She is neither foolish nor irrational. She reasons constantly, but her reasoning increasingly begins from assumptions shaped by prophecy, pride, and maternal fear. Once those assumptions harden, remarkably intelligent conclusions can still lead toward disastrous outcomes. Readers watching the process unfold from inside her thoughts often recognize the mistaken premise before Cersei does. That dramatic irony creates the impression that she lacks intelligence when the deeper problem lies elsewhere. Another important difference concerns the relationship between intelligence and self-knowledge. Tyrion often questions his own motives, even when reaching painful conclusions. Jaime gradually re-examines the meaning of honor after losing his sword hand. Jon Snow repeatedly doubts his own judgments while commanding the Night's Watch. Cersei rarely subjects herself to the same scrutiny. She readily identifies manipulation in others, but struggles to recognize it within herself. Her certainty, which once enabled decisive action, slowly becomes more dangerous than hesitation. Why does comparison with Petyr Baelish and Varys remain so tempting for readers? Because all three characters operate primarily through information rather than battlefield command. Yet their objectives differ profoundly. Littlefinger seeks constant instability because disorder allows him to climb higher than birth should permit. Varys sacrifices personal recognition for a secret long-term design involving the restoration of House Targaryen, or more precisely, the youth he presents as Aegon VI. Cersei pursues something much narrower and more personal. She wants security for her children, supremacy for House Lannister, and freedom from those who underestimate her because she is a woman. Her ambitions remain enormous, but they always return to family. That focus explains why she repeatedly succeeds in short-term crises. During Robert's final hunt, she recognized opportunity faster than anyone else. During Ned Stark's investigation, she anticipated his moral choices with remarkable accuracy. During the succession crisis, she moved before Stannis, Renly, or Robb could react. During the Battle of the Blackwater, she prepared emotionally for outcomes many others refused even to contemplate. These are not the achievements of an unintelligent ruler. They are the achievements of someone who understands immediate danger exceptionally well. The written canon also encourages a final comparison with Tywin Lannister himself. Father and daughter share formidable political instincts, deep pride in House Lannister, and an instinctive preference for decisive action. Both believe fear can become an instrument of government. Both value family as the foundation of power, though each defines family somewhat differently. Yet Tywin usually suppresses personal emotion until strategy has been settled. Cersei increasingly allows emotion to shape strategy from the beginning. That subtle distinction grows larger with every passing year. Some readers argue that had Cersei accepted Tyrion's advice more often or trusted Tywin's judgment more readily, many later disasters might have been avoided. Others suggest that Tywin's lifelong refusal to recognize her as a genuine political heir helped create exactly the insecurities that later undermined her decisions. The novels never settle this debate, and that uncertainty makes it worth lingering over. Martin consistently avoids presenting history as the product of one mistake or one virtue. Character, upbringing, coincidence, and old wounds combine until no single explanation fully satisfies. So was Cersei truly the smartest player in the Game of Thrones? The written histories support a more nuanced answer than either admiration or condemnation alone can provide. She was unquestionably among the most formidable political minds of her generation, capable of anticipating threats, manipulating succession, preserving dynastic power, and surviving dangers that destroyed more celebrated rivals. At the same time, her greatest strengths gradually became inseparable from her greatest weaknesses. The same confidence that enabled astonishing victories also made later errors increasingly difficult to recognize before they became irreversible. The candle beside the carved map has burned almost to its end now, just as it did when this journey began. Outside the narrow windows, King's Landing still lies beneath the same sea wind blowing in from Blackwater Bay, its towers standing where generations of kings, queens, conquerors, and dreamers believed they had finally mastered the game. Cersei once looked across that city convinced she understood its every danger, and for many years she truly understood more than almost anyone around her. Yet Westeros has always reserved its final lesson for even the cleverest players. Winning the game is never the same thing as remaining unchanged by it. When you look back across Cersei Lannister's life, the question slowly changes. It is no longer whether she was brilliant or flawed, because the novels make clear that she was both. The more interesting question is why intelligence alone never guarantees safety in George R.R. Martin's world. Every great player carries a strength that slowly becomes a weakness if left unchecked. Eddard Stark's honor becomes predictable. Tywin Lannister's authority blinds him to his own family. Tyrion's wit earns him enemies as quickly as allies. Cersei's certainty, sharpened through years of surviving a dangerous court, eventually convinces her that every instinct must be correct, simply because so many of them once were. Martin rarely writes about power as something people truly possess. His kings and queens speak as though they command history, yet history quietly continues shaping them in return. Robert Baratheon believes he has won the realm, but grief for Lyanna Stark never releases him. Stannis Baratheon claims the law only to discover that law cannot force love. Robb Stark wins battle after battle before losing everything through choices that no battlefield could prevent. Cersei secures the Iron Throne for her son and defeats men who underestimate her. Yet every victory demands another compromise, another deception, another sacrifice, until protecting power becomes almost impossible to separate from serving it. The throne never simply belongs to anyone. It changes everyone who reaches for it. There is another pattern running beneath these events, one quieter than war and easier to overlook. Throughout the histories of Westeros, people often fear prophecy because they imagine it steals their freedom. Yet the story suggests something more unsettling. Prophecy rarely walks into the world carrying chains. Instead, it whispers a possibility and waits to see who chooses to believe it. Cersei spends decades trying to outrun Maggie the Frog's words, but every attempt to escape them draws her attention back toward the same imagined future. The prophecy gains strength not because it controls her, but because she never stops measuring the world against it. You also begin to understand why Martin fills his histories with conflicting accounts, unreliable narrators, forgotten letters, and competing memories. The truth of a life cannot be captured by a single victory or a single failure. Fire and Blood preserves disagreements between Mushroom, Septon Eustace, and Grand Maester Munchen, because history itself refuses to become simple. The main novels ask readers to do something similar. They invite you to see Cersei not only through the frightened eyes of her enemies or the proud certainty of her own thoughts, but through the space between those perspectives. That space is where most human beings truly live, carrying virtues and flaws that cannot be cleanly separated. Perhaps that is why these stories remain compelling long after the battles end. Castles crumble, banners change, kings die, and dragons vanish or return, yet the deepest conflicts are almost always the quiet ones inside a person's own heart. Every generation believes it has finally mastered ambition, fear, loyalty, or love, only to discover that those forces cannot be ruled as easily as kingdoms. Westeros changes its rulers with remarkable frequency. Human nature changes far more slowly. That is the current running beneath every chronicle, from the Age of Heroes to the War of the Five Kings. Now the candle has nearly burned away, just as it had when this journey first began. Beyond the windows, the roofs of King's Landing rest beneath the same salt wind, drifting inland from Blackwater Bay. While somewhere below, a lone sentry still walks the walls through the quiet hours before dawn. The carved map upon the table has not changed, though countless hands have traced its roads, while imagining they could shape the fate of every castle upon it. You leave it now exactly as you found it, with one small flame reflecting softly across polished wood, reminding you that even the grandest games of kings and queens begin and end in silence.